So the Bhagavad-Gita is a book that includes all the important Ashtikya philosophies of its day. It is it has two characteristics. One is that it is syncretic, and the other is that it is polemic. Syncretic means it combines more philosophies which are often contradictory. And by bringing these contradictory philosophies together, it manages to blend them and resolve the contradictions. It's also polemic in the sense that it produces arguments and speaks or debates against the adharmic philosophies. And the adharmic philosophies here are really the Shramana philosophies or the precursor philosophies of both Buddhism and Jainism. Because the Bhagavad Gita was spoken at a time long before Buddhism and Jainism took birth. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna in the second chapter has just explained to Arjun part of Sankhya, and he has also explained to him the importance of Karma Yoga. By Sankhya, he means the enumerative philosophy that Sankhya literally means to count. So, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego, these are parts of my separated energies, and so on and so forth. So, he has already explained to him that you are not this body, you are the soul. And this soul which you are, nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dati pavaka, na chainyam kledyantapo, na shoshati marutah. That you cannot be cut by sword, you cannot be burnt by fire, you cannot be dried by the wind, you cannot be wet by water. All of this is being explained in the second chapter to Arjuna. Besides explaining these Sankhya principles, he also explains to Arjun the importance of doing your duty and fulfilling your responsibilities or and working in a spirit of renunciation and devotion, which is you do all your duties, including your karmic duty, karma kanda philosophies, duties, like performing yajna and so on, but you do them in a manner whereby you don't have your eye on the fruit. You are not taking shelter of the fruits of your labor. You're performing yajna, but even as you perform yajna, fire sacrifice, in the typical Vedic fashion, you are not seeking the results of that fire sacrifice. You see, the Vedas have many sections. You have the Brahmanas with the hymns, you have the uh, you know, part of the Vedas that deal with all the fire sacrifices and so on. And then you have the Vedantic episode of the Vedantic uh, section of the Vedas, which deal basically with Upanishads and so on. But when Krishna is speaking about the Vedas to Arjun, he starts by telling Arjun that don't think about the fruit, but many people will come and bewilder you with the idea of the fruits of performing fire sacrifice. Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravadantyava pashyatah vedavad ratah partha nanyadastati vadinah. So people will come and speak flowery words of the Vedas, and they will try to seduce you into performing these fire sacrifices for getting various fruit. Now, what are the fruits that you get by performing Vedic fire sacrifice? The Vedas describe in their flowery language that performance of the Vedic sacrifice gives you several fruits. Number one, if you have performed your duties and thereupon you have now performed the Vedic fire sacrifice, one of the results is that you will get whatever your requirements are to live on this earth. So all your material requirements will be met if you perform Vedic sacrifice, which is the first benefit. And how is that met? It is met by the beneficence of the devatas who are the beneficiaries of the fire sacrifice. In fact, later in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna is explaining that by performing this yajna, annad bhavanti bhutani yagnad anna sambhava, yagnad bhavati parjanyo. So he is explaining to him that when you perform this fire sacrifice, the gods who are pleased, they provide rain, and this rain becomes grain, and this grain then feeds you. So it's very difficult to survive if you do not perform sacrifice. There are many traditions that are there which are seen in history also. For example, in Kerala, for some time, fire sacrifices were less frequent in the Palakkad region. And so they requested the Brahmanas from Tamil Nadu to come down there, and therefore you have the Palakkadayars. They were brought there to perform fire sacrifices so that rain would come in that land of Palakkad. So similarly, you have one, your needs are satisfied, rain comes, you also are assured a place in Swarg or heaven. And having gone to heaven and enjoyed heavenly delights, you have to come back, of course. Krishna points out, Tetam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam kshene punyam lokam vishanti. Having exhausted your pious credits in Swarglok, you have to come back onto this earth. But you are born here in a family which is of higher aristocratic station compared to the family you're born in now. You will be given a more beautiful body. You will be born into a family that has greater wealth. And it's a family which will be very learned so that you will acquire spiritual knowledge and other knowledge along with it. So all these are the benefits of performing fire sacrifice or Vedic fire sacrifice. But Krishna says you perform fire sacrifice, but don't expect anything in return. Why? Because he says, Bhogaishwarya prasakta nam taya parta chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhavana vidyate. That those whose ideas are to acquire more enjoyment within this world will not have the determination to attain freedom from this cycle of birth and death and go back to Godhead. So, in fact, he says, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nishtraigunya Arjuna, Nirdvandva Nitya Sattvasto, Niryoga Kshem Atmavan. That, these Vedas deal only with the three gunas. They deal with Prakriti. And since they deal only with Prakriti, they will not help you to transcend Prakriti. You therefore strive to transcend Prakriti. And to transcend Prakriti, he advises him that you must work in the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, remembering God and forgetting your petty little ego self. So when he explains it in this way, Arjun is confused. Why is Arjun confused? Because there were philosophies that were renunciatory, or there were philosophies which made you give up the world, give up your family, give up your duties, give up society, and withdraw into the wilderness, into the forests, into the mountains, into monasteries, into basically to give up everything that they possessed. Some of these philosophies were atheistic. These philosophies that were atheistic were called Shramana philosophies, which today have evolved into Buddhism and Jainism. And also, there were Ashtikya philosophies that were also renunciatory. They did believe in God, but also they did believe in the Vedas, and they wanted you to understand God through two processes. One process was Sankhya philosophy. It is by constantly breaking up the world into its component parts. For example, if you look at an attractive member of the opposite sex, if you say, this is flesh, this is bone, this is a bag filled with pus and bile and uh, various other stool and urine, you will be turned off that beauty and no longer attracted to it. So Sankhya followed that principle to split up and to divide, to enumerate, to dissect mentally, and see the world as being composed of its component parts. The second thing was that while practicing Sankhya, which was the intellectual part of, or the philosophy of renunciation, they had a practical wing as well, practical division as well. And that practical division was meditation, called Dhyan Yoga, which we now know as perhaps it was Yagnavalkya's yoga. It has got nothing to do with Patanjali. It has got nothing to do with the physical posture exercises that are going on in the name of yoga, which actually are Hatha Yoga and were derived originally from Swedish exercises, calisthenics. So you had Sankhya, and Sankhya was coupled with Dhyan Yoga. And both of these were also renunciatory. They also demanded leaving the world. So Krishna, when he's explaining to Arjun that he has to work in the world, at the same time explaining to Arjun that he has to understand what Sankhya is, Arjun is confused. How can you have both? Because Sankhya means you have to abandon the world, follow Sankhya, and eventually go into Dhyan Yoga. Whereas if you work within the world without seeking the fruit also, you live within the world fulfilling all your responsibilities and duties. How can both of them be the same? You're confusing me. Tell me which one should I do? Should I give up the world and follow Sankhya and eventually go into Dhyan Yoga? Or should I perform my duties within the world as a Kshatriya, as a Khatri? And in addition to fulfilling all my duties, I will do all my Vedic karmas, my fire sacrifices, yajnas, havans, etc. And by doing that, Will I attain perfection? Which is better? This confuses me completely. So therefore, Krishna explains to him in the Bhagavad-Gita, the third chapter begins by Arjuna asking Krishna, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want me to engage in this ghastly war? If you think that thinking, analysis, intelligence is better than working, I am bewildered by your instructions, which seem equivocal. Therefore, please tell me decisively what is beneficial for me. And Krishna answers him and says, Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Lokesmin Vividha Nishta Pura Prokta Mayanagah Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So the Lord said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained there are two classes of men who realize the soul. Some are inclined to understand the soul by philosophical speculation, that is Sankhya, and others are inclined to know him by performing devotional work. But he emphasizes that you should not give up your duty. See, in this section of the Bhagavad Gita, for the first time, Krishna is introducing the importance of not giving up one's duty, not giving up one's responsibilities, not giving up one's profession, not giving up one's calling, not giving up one's job. Na karmanam anaramban naishkarmyam purusho ashnute na cha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Not by giving up your God-given duties will you become free from the laws of karma. See, Arjun is afraid. They are afraid of what? He is afraid of the law of karma. As I explained to you earlier in the previous sessions, that the battle is not just between Kauravas and Pandavas. It is between the law of karma and the law of dharma. The law of karma was telling Arjun, don't take part in the war, don't do your duties, don't do your dharma, run away from here. Otherwise, you will have to suffer the consequences of the war. All the sins, all the pap will come to you because you are killing. And this is, after all, the position of Arjun, as seen in the Bhagavad Gita, is really the position of all the Jain Buddhist kings who gave up their thrones. Buddha, Mahavir, they all gave up their royal positions. They gave up their responsibilities to their kingdom, to the people whom they ruled. They gave up their army, they gave up their palaces, they gave up everything, and they became renunciates. This, Krishna says, is the wrong thing to do. Giving up the world, Krishna says, is the wrong thing to do because by abandoning your duties, you cannot become free from karma. Your duties are given to you by God, and by giving up your God given duties, you cannot attain freedom from the law of karma. The law of karma is not a physical thing. The law of karma consists of the taint that comes upon you at the level of your subtle body. In fact, your subtle body is a bundle of karmas. And it's a bundle of karmas because you identify with it. As long as you have an ego self and you think you are the doer, you automatically incur karma. But Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-Gita that Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvashah Ahankara Vimudatma Kartahamiti Manyate. That all action is performed by Prakriti. You are not just the soul. You are a composite of the soul in a material envelope of Prakriti. And while you are the soul in a material envelope of Prakriti, that Prakriti you are struggling with. Mamai vanso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashastindriyani prakritistani karshati. And because the soul is so infinitesimal, you are struggling with this soul. You're struggling with the soul is struggling with the Prakriti, which consists of the mind and the five senses. And who is controlling the soul? The Lord is controlling the soul. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sa characharam hetuna nena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. Krishna says, I am the Adhyaksh. I am controlling Prakriti. And he says, there is no point in struggling with Prakriti. Daiviyasa gunamai mama maya duratyaya mam eva ya prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Krishna is explaining that don't struggle with your mind and your five senses. Simply surrender unto me. And thus you will transcend all the effects of Prakriti. So Krishna is explaining to Arjun that you should not give up the world. So what is Krishna doing here? He is bringing about a syncretic fusion. See, syncretic is a little different from synthesis. Synthesis means bringing two together. Syncretic means you bring two philosophies together, for example, which contradict each other, and then you resolve those contradictions. So in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna is bringing Sankhya and Yoga together for the first time. For the first time in the scriptures, Krishna is bringing Sankhya and Yoga together. And Krishna is explaining to him that you must do both. You must realize that you are the individual soul. You must realize you're immortal. You must realize that you are deathless. At the same time, you must do your duty. All renunciation, external, should be given up, and all renunciation, internal, should be followed. So from within, you renounce everything. But externally, let everyone see that you are just another person in the world doing your duty and fulfilling your responsibilities. So the world will respect you for doing your job and your duties in serving your family and society. And on the other hand, you will be at peace because you have surrendered to God internally and you have renounced the world, even though you are living within the world. Later in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out, Brahmanya adhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yah lipite na sa papena padma patram ivam basi. So if all actions, if you are doing for God, then just like the lotus leaf lies in water but does not get wet, if all your actions are offered to God, you will live in the world, but you will not be touched by the world. You will incur no sin. That's why Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshaishyami masucha. When Krishna says, give up all other varieties of a religion, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, he's talking about giving up all Shramana philosophies, especially the law of karma, which is why the Bhagavad Gita is a karma busting book. It busts the idea of the law of karma. And he says, if you do what I am telling you, you will be free from sin. So, Krishna in the third chapter very clearly indicates that you should not give up the world. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sannyasastu mahabhavo dukkham aptamo yogatah. If you renounce the world without having attained union with God, you will attain only sorrow. And elsewhere, he says that even if you have renounced, even if you have achieved perfection, even if you attained union with God, to set an example to others and to serve them, you must continue to work within the world. He also explains to him that you might think that you will renounce the world externally, but it is practically impossible for you to renounce the world externally. Because when you are living within the world, you are living within Prakriti, your Prakriti will keep interacting with other Prakritis. And Prakriti never sits still, it is constantly changing, it's constantly moving, it's constantly doing things. And therefore, not even for one instant, not even for 1 second, can you stop yourself from doing something. If your physical body is still, your mind will be active. Therefore, he says, don't even try to give up your physical duties and activities, your external duties and activities. Indeed, he even has a word for those who prematurely renounce the world. In the sixth text of the third chapter, Krishna says, Karma indriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriya arthan vimudatma mityachara sauchyate. Those who restrain their senses of action and organs of action and senses of enjoyment, but while their mind keeps dwelling on how they are going to enjoy the worldly things, such a person is fooling himself and is called a hypocrite. Don't be a hypocrite by externally renouncing the world and then keep on coveting what other people have possessed or do possess. Therefore, he says, don't be a hypocrite. And in text 7, Krishna points out and he says that yastva indriyani manasa niyamarabhate arjuna karma indriye karma yogam asakta savishishyate. That those of you who control your senses by your mind and engage your senses and your active organs in works of devotion without attachment, if you live and work within the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, then you will be far superior to somebody who has renounced the world. This is what Krishna is pointing out to Arjuna. So, the Bhagavad Gita is a book which is a syncretic fusion of several philosophies. It takes a renunciatory philosophy of Sankhya and Yoga and Dhyan Yoga and combines that with the philosophies of Karma Yoga. So it helps you to realize your spiritual objectives while at the same time you fulfill all your social obligations, you fulfill all your obligations towards your family, towards society, towards God, by doing all your duties, including your religious duties of performing your fire sacrifice, and karma. All this is pointed out in this third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But I will pause here because this is an important part of the Bhagavad Gita where we have stressed the importance of working in the world with devotion, being superior to giving up the world, and he combines the two philosophies by telling you to follow Sankhya and, of course, its corollary, which will come much later in sixth chapter, which is Dhyan Yoga. And do that even as you are fulfilling your duties and responsibilities in the world in a spirit of karma yoga, which comes in the fifth chapter. So I will pause here because this is Krishna is not against the Vedas. Krishna is for the Vedas, but he is against the Vedas being used for material benefit. He is against using the Vedas to become more attached to the world. He is for the Vedas being followed in a manner that helps you to become free from the world internally. So if you become free from the world internally, even while you fulfill your responsibilities externally, you are actually pleasing worldly minded people and you are also pleasing God. And the performance of both of these in conjunction is a syncretic fusion of Sankhya and Karma Yoga, which Krishna wants you to follow. So I will pause here. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Thank you for today's session, Shantanu. So my first question is, how can people today have a mix of both Krishna's teachings along with, practicing traditional Vedic practices?
See, the important point we want to mention over here is don't give up your job. Don't give up your responsibilities. Don't give up your duties to your parents, duties to your family. And while you are fulfilling all your duties, your hands and legs and your efforts may be within this world, but your heart should be with God. And if you can do that, you are truly blessed and you will find yourself becoming increasingly invulnerable to suffering. And therefore, you will become free from suffering to a great extent while living within this world. And at the time of death, whenever it comes, you will leave the world and go back to God.
Okay. And the second question is, what lessons can we learn from Krishna's approach to the Vedas for, having a very balanced spiritual life today?
So, the lessons that we learn from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is don't shave your head, wear orange robes, and leave your family. This is the first message, which is very clear. But don't also live in a home enjoying all the wrong things in life and forgetting God. But live your life fulfilling all your duties and obligations towards your family, towards your society, towards your job, towards your profession, and fulfill these duties in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion, always remembering Krishna and forgetting your ego self.
Thank you so much for today's lovely session, Shantanu. For our viewers who liked this session, please like this video and share it with your loved ones. And do connect with us again on next Thursday at 8 a.m. as we join Shantnuji for yet another session on the Bhagavad Gita. Namaste.
All right. Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.